was a clip of Jon Piper, of all people, talking about AI. You wanna explain what was happening in this clip and why you wanted to talk about it?
Yeah, I don't know if the last time I heard him speak about it was at the TGC conference where
Hmm.
he talked about writing a prayer in the voice of Don Carson, and it did it really well. And he said, to everyone in the room, it's like, is this worship? And he just did this podcast with David Platt on the Radical podcast. And I think this is the first time, and maybe I'm out of the loop, that I've heard him talk about AI again. And it looks like he has changed his perspective slightly.
You're listening to What Would Jesus Tech, a podcast that includes a pastor, a professor, and a product manager who happen to be Christians coming together to talk about how we can glorify God and apply a Christian worldview to all matters pertaining to technology and the Christian life. My name is Austin, and I serve as youth ministry director at Redeemer Christian Church in Amarillo. I am the pastor. The professor is out today. He has a sick child, and so he's not going to be joining us today. But we are joined by the product manager, the wonderful Joel. How you doing today?
Yeah, good. Happy to be here and talk about everything technology and the crazy things that are happening in the world.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going on right now that we want to get to eventually, but I don't know about you, Joel, but the news cycle just feels so blisteringly fast. It's always been fast, but it feels as though over the past month that the news cycle surrounding AI has just been somehow even faster than it normally is.
Yeah, I think I'm wondering if the milestones are still as notable or if they're like bigging up smaller things, right? Like, for
Mm,
example, Opus 4.7 just came out from Anthropic, which is their latest model. They were on 4.6 before. And
right.
they used to be going like, 1, 2, 3. Now it's like, okay, it's like the marginal improvement, but it's still pretty significant. So it
Right.
feels like newsworthy and stuff like that.
It's not like iOS updates where there for the longest time, like anytime Apple had even just an incremental update to iOS, they treated it as a relatively big thing. And it was usually not most of the time.
Yeah.
But with these, like even these incremental adjustments are meaningful steps forward. But I wonder if people like thinking about like smartphone updates and stuff like that, they hear like, it's just, an incremental improvement. Like there's nothing really to see here until the next big number shift happens and they just tune it out when maybe they shouldn't.
Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, there's a competition also going on between OpenAI and Anthropic that is so tight. So I think
Hmm.
that also increases the velocity of like things going on. And there's like kind of, another angle, which is like the open source community, and then like all the laggards who are like, we are still relevant. And so, yeah, it's crazy.
There are dozens of us, not just dozens, but it can feel like that at times.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
we but we wanted to talk today about something that you sent us earlier this morning. And I got to admit, this was something I never expected you to send. It was a clip of Jon Piper, of all people, talking about AI. You wanna explain what was happening in this clip and why you wanted to talk about it?
Yeah, I don't know if the last time I heard him speak about it was at the TGC conference where
Hmm.
he talked about writing a prayer in the voice of Don Carson, and it did it really well. And he said, to everyone in the room, "Is like, is this worship?" And it said, like, "No, it's not worship. It's a machine." And I think this is like a year ago now. Yeah,
Coming almost a year to the day. That would have been April 23rd, 2025.
right. Yeah, yeah. So I remember then talking with other friends in my community, and they kind of all heard about that too, right? It hit a larger demographic because of how popular he was. So
Oh
he
yeah.
just, yeah, and he just did this podcast with David Platt on the Radical podcast. And I think this is the first time, and maybe I'm out of the loop, that I've heard him talk about AI again. And it looks like he has changed his perspective slightly.
Yeah, it was interesting to watch that because as far as I know, this is the first time he's addressed AI, but Jon Piper outputs far more content than any one person can possibly keep up with. So just as a caveat that I don't listen to every single thing Jon Piper says or does because I don't have the time for it, and probably nobody does. The man is very active in his writing and podcasting and just does a lot. But it is interesting in that clip that he does reference that moment at TGC 25 where uh, he says, I asked ChatGPT to write a prayer. And I remember very vividly, I was sitting way in the back, kind of in our like little production booth. And me and the creative director at the time, his name was David Cover. As soon as we heard him say that, we both looked at each other and we immediately went into capture mode. We had a whole workflow for being able to uh, isolate sections of the live stream to begin turning it around for content. And the second we heard him say that, we immediately went to work on that because we knew it was going to be big, and it was. That clip, that clip of Jon Piper talking about asking ChatGPT to write a prayer in the style of Don Carson. I'm fairly certain. I never actually could prove this conclusively because TGC never really kept good social media data prior to when I worked for them. Uh, I'm fairly certain that that is the most successful piece of social media content that they've ever had. And I still am fairly certain that video is still putting up crazy numbers on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube. It was incredible. By far the most successful thing I've ever done from a social
Yeah.
media standpoint. Uh, but it was but it was provocative, and
Yeah.
it was really compelling.
And I think, maybe it's provocative to one extent, but also I think here's someone that a lot of people respect and look up to, and he is speaking on this novel thing that so many people don't know how to navigate. So
Yeah.
it's almost like, okay, this is a very pressing issue, and we're looking for someone who can give us a good perspective on it. And it just like
Mhm.
highlights like these two important worlds intersecting and how important it is.
Yeah. And the thrust of Piper's point was that ChatGPT could write and did write a very beautiful prayer that did sound an awful lot like Don Carson. When he read the full prayer in full, it was a beautiful prayer. It sounded exactly like Don Carson. And his point was not whether the prayer was biblical or whether the prayer was acceptable or whether it even sounded like Don Carson. His primary point in that prayer is that this is not true Christian worship because it is a machine that cannot feel. It is not something that is genuinely praising to God because praise from God comes from creatures that he created to feel, to experience the joy and the gladness that comes from praying to the Lord, which is something that a machine by definition can never do. And it was interesting. It was interesting monitoring the comments to that video or to that clip after we published it on TDC socials. Uh, the amount of pushback, and he, I think, references that indirectly in this radical podcast clip. Where he talks about a lot of people kind of pushed back and disagreed on that, and there was a substantial amount of pushback. Uh, but Joel, what do you think? Do you think that his original point is still a valid point even after he kind of clarifies it? I know we'll talk about the clarifications here in a second, but do you still stand by that original distinction he made?
I think so. I think when I heard it back then, I thought,
Because you were
okay,
live, you were there in
yeah.
person, so
Yeah,
you
I
got to
was
hear that
there
live.
probably like mid audience and I heard it and I was like, oh, the feeling of like, hey, he's talking about the world I'm in, right? So I do think that it was a good take in the sense of like, look, this is a good way to think about machines and humans, and more so double click on what makes us human. But
Yeah,
what I didn't feel fulfilled is the definition of like what makes us human. I think, and this probably gets to the updated clip, I think we are defined in our humanity as unique because of our spirit. And I don't think it's as
yeah,
much of the other things like emotion. And we've had a couple conversations also on this pod about like what's the difference, what's our emotions, and then also like the trade-offs with AI, like what does it take away from you to what it gives you.
Yes.
So I think those, and that he talked about that. So let's maybe jump into that and kind of refresh that, because we also talked recently on the podcast with some other people about the trade-offs as well.
Right. So he says up front that the biggest dangers with AI are when it takes away something human from him. If it takes away his ability to read, if it takes away his ability to write, if it takes away his ability to be creative, then AI is a detriment. But I was surprised in watching this clip how he does take a much more not neutral, that's not the right word, but more generally optimistic view of AI insofar as going so far to say that AI is a kind of intelligence. That is something that a lot of people in kind of my world, that orbit, are very reluctant to say that AI is a legitimate type of intelligence,
What?
not a superior.
Why is that even a concern? I don't know.
Well, I think it's a concern because intelligence is seen as something that is given by God to
Hmm.
creation and to created beings, and
Right.
that humans cannot pass on intelligence to other things because that's just not something that humans have the ability to do.
Right.
Any intelligence that I just this time a week ago, my wife was giving birth, and our daughter is not technically a week old as of the time of this recording. She still got like 3 hours to go before she officially hits a week old. Uh, but there's a level of intelligence that my nearly week old daughter has, but we didn't create that intelligence. God is the one who designed those processes to where our daughter has a human intelligence, small and budding as it is. We do not have the ability, so the thinking goes, to impart something that was given to us into other things.
Right.
And that to do so, and I bet if Andrew were here, he would make this point, to attempt to do so is actually verging on idolatry. Because our intelligence is something that we receive. It is not something that we created or can create in others. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. And I think especially in, yeah, like some theological communities, like intelligence is such a valued trait and unique to
Yes.
humans, right? And I think, yeah, coming in maybe from the outside a little bit, I would say, like, yes, intelligence is important, but I think I always expected this moment, and I actually expect, the singularity, which is like intelligence actually
Right.
superseding us, right? So I
Right.
never felt that concern about
I
intelligence.
I'm still relatively skeptical on the singularity as a concept, but I'm with Piper. I do acknowledge that AI is a classification of intelligence, and I think that is. I get a little annoyed when people in my tribe like want to kind of die on that hill. I just don't think that's the best hill to try to die on. I think
Mhm.
Piper's distinction that whenever AI takes away things from me that are human, that is by far the most important point one could make about AI and intelligence, and that AI does allow you to take your intelligence and do things, and it does enable you to do things that you otherwise would not be able to do. Later in the episode, we'll talk a little bit about AI and parenting, which you're. I just welcomed a child into the world, my second child. You are about to welcome your
Couple of
third.
weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is
So
something. So this is something, and this is something that I think is on the minds of a lot of people. But going back to Piper, though, he mentions that AI is a type of intelligence, and that this is going to have, this is going to have positive and negative consequences. But this is the thing that I really appreciate, and this is the thing that I personally kind of independently uh, have come to a similar conclusion, just in the different reasons that now more than ever, it's not intelligence by itself, it's not emotion by itself, although those are both important things. It is the ability to glorify God and enjoy Him forever as the thing that separates human intelligence and human emotion from AI intelligence and
yeah.
AI emotion. because
Yeah. And
those things can be uh, mimicked or expressed in a unique way. But the thing that makes them different from human versions is not so much quantity or quality, but end. And the end for human emotion, human intelligence, human reasoning is found in glorifying God and enjoying Him forever.
yeah. And I think credit to Piper because he basically endorsed AI to an extent to be like,
He
look, it's
did. He
coming.
did.
And he's like, we should lean in, right? He is like,
He
we
did.
should use it for good things. And he like kind of encouraged people, which I think that in itself is also for a lot of people going to be like, oh, okay, what does that mean? What does it look like? But I
Yes.
think to your point on what defines humans and humanity and kind of what he was referring to as like, oh, now he's shifting away from intelligence and more towards the emotion and the heart. I kind of have trouble with that word emotion. And it's more so because back to the singularity and AGI point, everyone has this like milestone of like, oh, only when the AI does this, when it passes the Turing
Right.
test, then I'll be like, oh, it's, and then the milestone moves. And it's like, oh, only when it
Yeah.
does this,
Mhm.
the
Right.
milestone moves. And we in the like Christian community are basically, you know, at risk of falling into the same conundrum where it's like, okay, it doesn't have emotion. And then maybe some innovations happen and we understand exactly how emotion works and can imbue that into machines. Then it's like, oh, it's not really emotion. So I think if you take it to the logical nth degree, I think the characteristic that is divinely unique to us is our spirit that goes
Yes.
to be with God after, right? And I don't
Yes.
think there is anything that you can say, hey, we have control of the spirit realm so we can imbue a spirit into a machine. I don't think that is a possibility, or I'll say it is not a possibility.
Yeah.
And that's something that makes us unique.
It's something that makes us unique. And two, I would add that we are spiritual beings and embodied at the same time, which right now the disconnect between AI and robotics, like everything is moving to those two worlds being combined together at some
Converged.
point,
Yeah.
converge together at some point. Like that is the natural end of two very distinct industries who will eventually just end up, I think, largely becoming a single industry where robotics and AI eventually become just kind of uh, indistinct from one another. But even then, our embodied spiritual existence, the fact that we have both a soul and a body, is something that is designed to endure in a way that AI intelligence or even robotics, by definition, cannot. No robot at any point in the history of robotics will experience the resurrection from the dead that
Hmm.
that is in Christ. No AI intelligence, no matter how personalized it is, will go to be with the Lord upon death and will be then reunited back to that resurrected, glorified body. Christian eschatology, our view of the end times, is probably the most important starting point for assessing not just the current state of AI, but where AI and robotics can even go to see that there may be good and genuine blessings that come from these developments, but their end, their design, their endpoint is not the same as humans. And we got to always keep that
Hmm.
in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's good clarification. And yeah, I do think that, you know, in the cutting edge research world, we are already trying to think about how do we seed steering functions into AI that
Hmm.
actually is representative of our emotion. So I think like
Yeah.
we have intelligence now, we are looking at like the next frontier, and again, it's like reflective of the human mind where the prefrontal cortex is where more of our like active thinking happens. But then, the hippocampus, the cerebellum, that's where we have these like intuitions and feelings that we call them.
Yeah.
And that it can also be reflected in the design of the brain or machine brain. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so long as you're saying, I guess the question is like, where do feelings come from? Do feelings come from the brain? Scientifically, yes. But when we say feelings of the heart, what does that mean, right? Is feelings
Right.
of the heart actually the spirit?
Yeah. Or, yeah, Godward feelings, feelings that are aimed towards the delight and enjoyment of God. That is not something that is a human creation. That is a divine creation. That is something that comes from above humans, given to us by our creator, that does make us different from machines. And his point, he talks about in the video about the difference between prayer and praise, and how that prayer that ChatGPT wrote, was it a prayer? Yeah, in like a written sense, but was it the same thing as praise? And his distinction was, no, that's not praise, because machines can't praise. Machines can't do that. Only humans can do that. And so human emotion is involved in praise in a way that robotic emotion or AI emotion, however far we make on that, can never have that spiritual component to it,
Yeah.
because that's
So,
something that
okay.
only humans can have.
So now the question is, and this is related to what does it take away from us? If we sing the song or read the prayer that AI wrote in earnest to God, that still counts as
That's
praise.
yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was actually something that I disagreed with to a certain extent. Um, he didn't explicitly say this, but a lot of people kind of picked up on it, and I think was maybe right to kind of push back on this. As someone who prays the Book of Common Prayer, the 1662 Book of Common Prayer, for both morning and evening prayer, the foundation of my prayer life is pre-written prayer. That's not
Mm.
all of my prayer life. I still pray throughout the day. I still pray even spontaneously while praying through the morning and evening office of the Book of Common Prayer. But the floor of my prayer life, kind of that the ground zero, is this historic prayer rite that was developed in the course of the Protestant Reformation. I think it is one of the most beautiful things to ever been produced from that period of time. Even though I'm not an Anglican, I'm Presbyterian in my theology. I absolutely love the Book of Common Prayer, and so praying pre-written prayers, I think it's a bit of a bad rap, and it's because we kind of go maybe too far in the opposite direction when it comes to spirituality and emotion. That if it's not you, if it's not from the heart, if it's not your own words and only uniquely your words, that it's not real, it's not genuine, it's not enough, when that may be an equal and opposite error. There is wisdom in praying prayers in union with others, praying the same prayer as the saints have prayed
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
past. Now, you can hide behind those prayers and create kind of a veil of traditionalism, that you're praying these prayers, but you know in your heart and your soul that you don't love God and that you don't care about Him. But to go to the opposite extreme and say that every time you pray, it's got to be original, it's got to be fresh, it's got to be you in order for it to count, that's just as wrong, and that's just as
Yeah.
damaging. And so, did I pray that prayer that ChatGPT wrote? No. Am I going to? No. Do I think that in principle praying pre-written prayers is a bad thing? No, absolutely not. I
Yeah.
actually think it's probably more helpful than people realize. If you struggle with your prayer life, and if you have a hard time uh, maintaining a consistent prayer life, I would actually really strongly commend that you find pre-written prayers to kind of set that floor for your life, and you'll be surprised pretty quickly how you can build a pretty consistent prayer life from that.
Yeah. I mean, like, I always found it notable that there is a passage in scripture where Jesus says, "This is how you pray, the Lord's
Right.
Prayer." And it's
Right.
a pre written prayer that
Right.
he tells us, follow this prayer,
Right.
you know? And
Right.
what I found in many times in my life where I don't know what to say, I will actually say the Lord's Prayer,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it is like, okay, like, I don't know where to begin, but, like, if I follow your model, right, then I can, like, um, like, come under and submit my life to you, right, wherever this is going.
Mhm.
So I think, like, there is a lot of value in pre-written prayers and, as a principle.
Yes. I think this is where John Piper's pietism, so uh if you were to kind of like trace out what makes John Piper a little bit distinct from some of his other contemporaries and the broader Reformed Calvinistic movement, Piper comes from a strand of Reformed theology that we would call pietism. I'm not a pietist. I think very
Okay.
highly of pietism, insofar as it kind of rightly encourages and promotes the emotional response to God and to the gospel, and that our emotions do play a very central part of our worship. Hallelujah, amen, 100% to that. But where pietism can kind of get a little bit off the rails is in that insisting that like anything that is not anything that is not deeply and personally emotional at the onset is not appropriate for the Christian life. And so I don't know if Piper would necessarily promote or condemn the use of pre-written prayers. I don't actually know where he stands on that, just to be clear. But there is something to be said that, and anywhere emotion is kind of central, is kind of prioritized as being like the chief central mark of genuine spirituality, you do run the risk of making emotions the measure by which you measure your the measure by which you assert your
How good
confidence
it
in
is.
Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, even to bring another kind of denomination into it with like speaking in tongues,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
whole concept of speaking in tongues is actually, it is not you speaking, it is the Holy Spirit, speaking through you, right? And either
Mhm.
known or unknown tongues, whichever you want to call it. But that in itself, again, is not your capability, your knowledge, your emotion. It's actually like you're removing that and being a conduit. So I think like
Right.
there's a lot of different camps where these nuances make sense. But I do want to maybe even like segue a little bit further to when you use maybe a pre-written prayer or something, it does affect how your interaction goes with the Lord, right? It has
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
effect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, and I do agree with that point of like using AI is going to have an effect. But I think the take is often too simple where is it making you more or less creative or something like that.
Yes.
I think it's
Yes.
always a complex of like it will affect you in this specific way and then increase you in another way, but both of them are in the creative realm, right? So for
Yeah.
example, it you maybe let's say for songwriting, that's like another like big area that's like happening. It's like, okay, all of these songwriters put so much effort into, the melody and the tune and all those things. And now AI can go and create that and it can do it
Hmm.
better, right? So it may take away that skill of creating like nice music. But does
Right.
it also allow then us to have a better skill in curation of creative music or like um, production or distribution or like messaging or like those other things that aren't necessarily about the act of creating songwriting in and of itself.
On paper, I don't disagree with that. But as a musician, as somebody who is in a band, somebody whose best friend runs a studio, while granting that that is possible on paper, I think reality is telling a very different story, and it's telling a different story for kind of the sole reason that, uh, kind of similar to what's happening in academia right now. AI is not creating new problems; it is simply turbocharging problems that have already existed. And in the state of pop music, and by pop music, I'm not talking about pop as a genre. I mean like popular music in general, whether that's
Hmm.
pop or rock or country. Anything that you can find on a radio station, on an FM radio station, regardless of the genre, has been in a relative creative rut for some time now. And what Suno being one of the
That's a
largest,
famous one, right?
yeah, being the famous one. I'm not a fan of Suno.
I've never used it.
I think what Suno is doing is actually like tremendously unethical in a lot of ways. And I
Okay.
that would be an episode for another time where I can bring on one of my bandmates who's been following this pretty closely to talk about. Uh, but what Suno is doing is simply exacerbating a problem that has already been there for some time. Just like what ChatGPT has done in education, higher and academia
Yeah.
It didn't create this problem. It just simply exposed the magnitude of this problem and is now really exploiting it.
Mhm.
I don't think that AI generated music in its current form is going to make music better, but I do think in the long run, I mean, in the short term, I think we're going to really suffer for this, but in the long term, I do have high hopes for the state of the music industry, but I think it's going to be in spite of AI and not really because of it. I think wherever you see AI be deployed in music, it's going to be largely a background process, where I think that is actually the more exciting side of AI in music. But to use AI for songwriting, uh, I I have a gut feeling that those that try to like bank on that to try to get big, they might get 15 minutes of fame, and that'll be all they ever get.
Yeah, I think, songwriting is the one example that I actually think is a little bit weak on the AI front
Oh
because
yeah,
people are like, well, that's an AI song. And like, as soon as you find that out, you kind of like lose your
yeah,
value
oh
of it,
yeah,
right?
oh yeah,
It's like, and then that's our human like value that we place in like human created things. So I think like authenticity and non AI work is going to have a like handcrafted, we like really like handcrafted furniture or these type
yes.
of things. It's going to have like a halo compared to like the industry, like, oh, this is just assembled in a factory or something like that.
Yeah, yes, it's gonna feel very, um, very by the numbers. And the problem is that a lot of pop music has been by the numbers for a long time now. Uh, there are gonna be places that AI music can't touch. I think indie, like not just indie as a genre, but the independent market, and independent style markets. So the progressive metal, rock and metal market where I tend to live. Uh, is going to be pretty self resistant to that because you can't quite do paint by the numbers style music in those spaces. But everywhere else, yeah, uh, there's going to be, I think, over the next couple of years, several major top 40 songs that are going to be by AI, and most people won't be able to tell that at first, and that's the problem.
Mhm.
That's what AI music is exploiting. It's not creating something new. It's exploiting a weakness that's been in music for a while now.
Yeah, and I think so we talk about like the inevitability of these things. And in a domain that I understand better is like, product creation. So let's talk about like websites or other things that you can create. Um, sorry, I have to get that out the printer.
Yeah.
So, okay. So in the product domain where you're creating websites or other sorts of apps, things like that, there's less of a taste of like, oh, this was human generated versus this is AI
Yeah.
generated. You're gonna be like, oh, you know what? I don't really care. Does it accomplish the job that I
Yes.
want it to do?
Right. Right.
Right. So in that domain, it will be more like the taste of what is good is actually becoming more important for the people who
Yes.
are pushing it forward. So I do wonder if like, yeah, you'd be able to create 1,000 songs and actually like more have a influence on which one you pick. And maybe, yeah, maybe that would be like how the two domains are like similar to each other.
I mean, maybe the problem that I see with that is, and this is where I think the volume of what AI music can output is the single biggest threat to it. There's a very serious problem right now in streaming music, namely Spotify, but to a lesser extent Apple Music and YouTube as well, where I don't know if you call it hijacking. That maybe is not the right word for it, but AI music is appearing on the profiles of established artists. It's been happening in the jazz music world. Ted Gioria, the honest broker on Substack, has been covering this really well, where random random stuff just shows up on the music pages of jazz musicians, some of which are alive, some of which are dead. Um, but it begins to siphon. It gets attention. It begins to siphon away royalty money from the place for that. And it's happened to established artists outside of jazz. It happened probably 7 or 8 months ago to two of my favorite bands, The Contortionist and The Ocean. The Contortionist being a big deal because they've not put out an album in nearly 10 years, and me and my bandmates are waiting with bated breath for them to finally put out an album. And so when I woke up one morning and saw that there was a new album by The Contortionist, I, I, I was for a half a moment thinking, oh my gosh, they did a surprise drop of an album uh, that I wouldn't listen to it. And it was a parrot in like 10 seconds. I'm like, nah, this is crap. It happened to the Christian band Red the other day. I got a notification
Hmm.
that they had something, and it was like MS Paint level art for the cover art.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, so like the distribution side of AI music right now is almost entirely exploitative. It's almost entirely uh, stealing and robbing from others to get attention and notoriety. I don't think that's always going to be the case. I think it's just simply exposing weaknesses in the streaming music verification process. But uh, the fact that so much music can just be so quickly added into these spaces that have otherwise previously been very well guarded and gate kept. I'm not sure that's going to end well for AI music
Yeah.
on that
Yeah.
front.
So, I think this is good because we are seeing that AI in different areas has completely different, perception and value. And like the
Yeah.
one area that I'm probably going to try using AI for is agentic parenting. And I'm not sure if you've
Oh
seen this.
boy.
I also sent you a link earlier that has been blowing up on a mom who has 4 kids and is using AI to help parent and homeschool the kids. And this was
Right.
featured by A16Z, which is a big venture capital company. And it's interesting. I mean, there's a couple trends here of like people moving towards more homeschooling and AI making
Yeah.
that possible. But
Yeah.
even like putting homeschool aside, like there was elements of like using AI to help you, child rearing. So
Yeah.
what off the cuff, what are you thinking?
Off the cuff, I'm skeptical, but not so far as to say that this should be completely poo-pooed. I do think that agentic AI. We've talked about this on the show several times now. Like whatever you think about LLMs, whatever you think of ChatGPT or Grok or any AI chatbots, it's not that it's irrelevant to agents, but it's wildly incomplete. Agentic AI is a whole new frontier of AI. It may share the same name, but it's a whole new world. And I do think that agentic AI, I personally find significantly more important than chatbots ever did. To be completely candid, I've never been uh, very impressed with chatbots and
Hmm.
with LLMs. Not saying that they're not powerful or that they're not capable, but for my line of work and for the world I live in, I see their limitations a little bit more clearly. But I know of several people who use them for things that I think are perfectly good and mundane and fine. I have a friend who his entire workout regimen was created by ChatGPT, and he's been killing it and crushing it, and it's been working really well. I have used ChatGPT for some, or not ChatGPT. I've used Claude to handle some uh, got a low level grindy admin work in ministries, like kind of stuff that like it's just gonna be a slog to do, and it's time I could be spent doing other things. So I can't completely say at the onset that like, yeah, the thought of using agentic AI in parenting is automatically a bad thing, but like with the rest of AI in general, what you're using it for matters quite a bit.
Yeah.
The homeschooling front is interesting because like as someone who was homeschooled, uh,
Hmm.
the thought of having personalized lesson plans, I think is actually really appealing. I don't know if it's completely without some serious side effects, um, but I find the idea of it very promising. Um, yeah, there's just that's my off the cuff thoughts.
Okay, okay. Here, so let me recap basically what is happening for the, viewers, for people who don't really know. There was a release of something called OpenClaw. We talked about it before.
Right,
And basically it is the surrounding harness that the LLMs are now funneled by to do something purposeful. If you think of like a wild horse, it has a lot of horsepower, it's pretty powerful, but it's just going to run wild. If you put a
right,
harness on it, now you can actually pull a cart. You can actually like turn it into something that's doing something valuable for you. So there's this whole world of like harness engineering that came out of that kind of eureka idea, I guess, of being
Hmm.
like, hey, if we give the agent guidelines on how to do a particular task, it can actually repeatably do that task on its own.
Right.
And, it starts with saying, like, okay, go do this task that I've like pre trained you on doing. And then it could
Yeah.
be like, well, now I'm going to layer a level of abstraction where if another agent gets this, positive signal, then it will tell you to go and do that task. So
Yeah.
simple use cases is kind of like ordering groceries, right? Like there's a lot
Right.
of new grocery stores that can deliver groceries to you, and some people are doing that, but you still have to go in and like shop on your phone, right?
Right.
But now if you can have the agent who knows the foods you like, the cuisines you want to make, the recipes, it can go and say like, well, okay, I'm just going to like put this order in, and if you give the skill where it can see how your fridge is doing, or even just like texted a voice note, it will
Right.
go and say, like, okay, yeah, I'll go take care of that. And that gives
Yeah.
you that time back where you can actually spend that now with your kids. So it's giving you more time with your kids and taking away time from something that was maybe a little bit more repetitive or monotonous.
So it's I want to double click on that point because I make that argument. I think that that argument is a true argument insofar as it goes that AI does in principle save time for things that are maybe tedious and time consuming and allows you the opportunity to reinvest that time into other more meaningful things. Like I think on paper that's true. I'm not sure I would want uh grocery shopping to be one of those things.
Mm,
For the sole reason that my son Moses loves to go shopping. That's one of his favorite things.
yeah.
Whenever
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
say we go, he loves riding around in the cart and just looking around at all the stuff. It calms him down. It distracts him. It's mental stimulation that's not that's not screens or something else. So I'm not sure I would want that particular thing. And my more kind of bigger point is that kind of like with what email did, like that was a similar promise with email back when email was becoming big. Is that like, this is going to save you time from having to print a letter and put it in an envelope and take it to the post office and all of that. Like you can just do it at your
Yeah.
computer, it'll save you time. And what happened is that yes, it did save that time, but then that time didn't get refilled or redirected towards like being with your kids or reading books or working on hobbies or whatever. It just led to more work. It just led
Yeah.
to your that time getting filled with more work. The mantra of work smarter, not harder, a wonderful mantra in a vacuum, but is more often than not used to work smarter so we can give you more work,
Yeah,
not less
I mean,
work.
yeah, that's the concept of Jevons paradox, where it's like
Yeah,
the new technology actually makes you use or do more, not less. So it's like for
right.
the mail, it's like, okay, yeah, it took away the time from like packing and shipping and dropping off. And with that time, we just sent more mail,
Yes,
like, but it's
exactly,
just digital.
exactly.
So the
Right.
amount of mail actually exploded,
Yes.
because it was like digital mail and stuff like that. So I think
Right.
that is definitely going to be, the counterpoint to people go like, oh, AI is going to take away jobs and stuff. And like, yes, it will take away certain tasks and certain elements,
Yeah.
but there is going to be an explosion of new things that it like creates and allows people to do.
Yes. Yes. And I'm not saying that like and I'm not saying that like wanting to like outsource your grocery shopping to agents is automatically a bad thing. Like and that
No, no, no. It's
absolutely
it's
not.
personal, right? It's like, what do
It's
you want to
yeah.
do with your family, right?
Yes. And I do know that for some uh there are tasks that I haven't had a chance to explore myself. I've not had the opportunity to personally explore much of my own uh agentic workflows just simply getting ready to have a baby and be on paternity leave. My work has been kind of preoccupied. Uh, but I do think it's important that if you're curious about this, to just try it and see what happens. Like this isn't something that
Mhm.
you need to be afraid of, and this isn't something that you need to feel like you need to go all in on if you don't want to either. That's something that kind of our polarized extreme societies, pushing you in one direction or another. And you can just say no to that. You can just say, yeah, I'm going to try this out for a couple of things. And if I like it, I'll keep doing it. If I don't like it, then I'm going to stop. Uh, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And even like on the homeschooling front, it's like, yeah, you don't have to maybe try it, but you could if you want to, you know? I
Yeah.
think that's what it allows you to do. And maybe I'll just like color the homeschooling example also right before we kind of end here is what this lady did is said, "Hey, these are the curriculum that I like, Montessori, this curriculum,
Right.
whatever."
Right.
And in the homeschool world, there's like a lot of curriculum,
Yes.
and
Yes, there
you can
are.
go to your agent and be like, "This is what I want you to teach and how I want you to teach." And then what it actually does is maybe to demystify it, it's not actually teaching the kid directly.
Yes.
That is
Yes.
available. That's a different product, but what it does is actually like creates a lesson plan so the mother can like spend the time with the kid, open the workbook, and then at the end of the lesson,
Yeah.
what she does is she like takes pictures and be like, okay, send it to the agent really quick. This is where we're at. And the agent like will create like, oh, this is what,
Yep.
Timmy did today, and this is where he's at. And let's like, he's struggling with this. So let's do this in the next level. So it's
Yeah.
enabling people who maybe even don't have that skill set on like, how do I teach and stuff. It's
Yes.
enabling them to do that.
Yes, and that I think is really exciting and promising, and I like that version of it. I am still against I'm still against pretty strongly in principle of students of children in particular learning primarily by screens. I think
Yeah.
that
Screens are,
I
there's
think
something with them.
I think pedagogically that has proven all of the promise and the hype and the potential that was touted for kind of going all in on screens in the 2010s. I think has just kind of is just overwhelmingly conclusive at this point. Just did not live up to the hype, and I think has caused more problems than it solved. So I'm all for creative solutions like this where uh, very specific task is outsourced and then the mother is involved and then she hands it off for another very specific task and then keeps on going. That I think is really exciting and promising. I know that this technology is going to be abused. I know that this technology is going to be used
Mhm.
to empower things that I don't necessarily like. And while I can and should, speak out against that and try to persuade people like, hey, this is not the best way to do that, that doesn't mean that the imagination one can have for using these things in different ways that may be better and maybe genuinely constructive. We shouldn't count those out either.
Yeah. So I think, using the time, similar to what Piper said, it's like the technology is here, it's coming.
Yeah,
Let's try and figure out how to use it for good, for God's purpose, for beneficial, like benefiting our neighbors. Like, I think that is, at least I feel that calling of like, I got to figure it out because otherwise, in a vacuum, you know, we don't want the main use cases to be for evil.
right. That's something I'm working on another my next uh, Substack piece for next week, and one of the things that I'm going to write about in that piece is one of the things I want to do in the AI age that I wish I had done more of in the social media age. Not saying that social media is going away or anything like that, but as we enter into kind of this next chapter of the internet, the one thing I want to do differently that I didn't do very well at all these past 10, 15 years is be thankful for the surprising ways that God is going to use AI to advance his kingdom.
Mhm.
And to genuinely express gratitude that God is powerful enough to use AI in surprising ways to advance his kingdom. That doesn't mean that everything that AI does is going to do that. In fact, there's going to be a lot of things that AI does that are going to be stumbling blocks and obstacles for people entering the kingdom. But I don't think that's going to be every single thing that AI touches. And I want to look for those opportunities to express thanks and gratitude for creative use of AI and recognize that God is able to do really good things from this if we're just willing to trust that He's in charge of it all. Well, cool.
Well,
Any closing thoughts, Joel? We've covered quite a bit of ground today.
nothing more than I got 2 weeks to get ready for the baby and get my agents to try and make it easier because it's gonna
You
be
take any
hard.
time? You take any time off?
Yeah, I'll take 2 weeks for the beginning and then figure out how it goes.
Nice. Yeah, as of this recording, I am a week and some change into 3.5 weeks of time off, which has been just wonderful for my family. And like we really are just thankful for how the Lord has blessed us with our daughter Miriam compared to how things went with Moses, our firstborn son. Uh, Things could not be going any better than they are. So we're very thankful for that. Uh, but this has been another episode of What Would Jesus Tech? You can support this show in two ways. First, you can support the show financially. We like to keep this podcast ad free. We don't want to incorporate ads into the podcast to try to make money off of it. And it's your financial support through Patreon that makes this possible. And so you can find our link to our Patreon in the show notes and financially support the show so that we are able to continue making the best content that we can make without having to resort to pulling in ads and advertisements to try to pay some of the bills that need to be paid and invest in some of the things that we want to invest in over the coming years. You can also join our Discord server. Our Discord server is relatively chill by most Discord server standards. It's a little bit slower than a lot of Discord servers, but I really appreciate that. I'm a member of a couple of other Discord servers that just feel like it's just always moving and you can barely keep up. This isn't one of them. This one's really chill and laid back. Come hang in our Discord server. It's free to join. You don't have to be a Patreon member to join that, but you being there, talking either about the episode or about tech news or events or ways we can pray for you, that's one of the things that we love doing. So come hang out with us in Discord. But this has been What Would Jesus Tech? Use tech, find rest, and glorify God. Y'all have a great rest of your day.
See ya.